I knew something was wrong the second Grant Lawson walked into our headquarters lobby like it was a movie premiere instead of a Monday morning budget review. He wasn't even officially sworn in as CEO yet. His paperwork was still circling HR, but he strolled across the marble floor with the kind of confidence only found in people who had never been told no. Tailored navy suit, sneakers so white they hurt my eyes, and that infuriating smile, polished like it came out of a branding deck. By the time he reached the reception desk, half the junior staff were already straightening their posture, adjusting their badges, giggling like freshmen spotting a quarterback. I stood near the elevators with my burnt office coffee, watching silently. It wasn't admiration I saw on their faces. It was survival, the kind where you laugh at jokes before you even hear the punchline.
First order of business,
Grant announced, loud enough for echoes to dance along the glass walls. We need to rip out this old carpet. Smells like the 90s in here. Fresh era. Fresh floors. The staff laughed. I didn't, because I knew exactly what that meant. Corporate death doesn't arrive with a firing squad. It arrives with a new carpet. I've kept this company standing for 15 years. Not because anyone asked me nicely. Not because they handed me awards or spa vouchers. Hell no. I kept it standing because somebody had to. Somebody had to explain to panicked investors during the 2008 crash why liquidity ratios weren't doomsday signals. Somebody had to correct quarterly filings when the CFO forgot that depreciation schedules actually matter. That somebody was always me. My name is Natalie Walker, Director of Strategic Finance. My job description? The unofficial janitor of everyone else's mess, armed with spreadsheets and duct tape diplomacy. I was never the star, never the quote in Forbes, but when something broke, when a board member's forecast crumbled under scrutiny, I was the one who patched it before blood hit the carpet. People like to call me the spreadsheet whisperer at offsites after their second whiskey. Sometimes the spine of the operation, if they were feeling generous. I never asked for flattery. I didn't need it, because my reason for being here went far deeper than status. See, everyone assumed I clawed my way up piece by piece, late nights and coffee-fueled weekends. That's only half the story. Yes, I bled for this place, but what nobody knew, not even the last CEO, was that my name wasn't just in the company directory. It was written into the capital structure itself. My mother made sure of that. Eleanor Walker is not a warm woman. She doesn't knit, doesn't bake cookies, doesn't call me sweetheart. She's the type who sends a birthday card with no note inside, just a post-it marked, continue. Cold, precise, surgical, but loyal in ways most people can't even comprehend. 25 years ago, when this company was a burning wreck on the verge of bankruptcy, she saved it. Not as an equity partner, not as a board member. She wrote a private check, $58 million, structured as a complex loan with conditions only she fully understood. No press release, no seat at the table. Just one stipulation buried deep in Schedule B. Her daughter gets a permanent seat in finance, insulated from politics, termination subject only to full board approval. I was still in college when she inked that deal. Too young to understand what she'd done. Too naive to see she'd effectively bought me a place in the room where it happened. I didn't ride her coattails blindly, though. I worked. God, I worked. Nights when the rest of the office slept, I scrubbed cash flow models until they gleamed. Weekends when everyone else attended weddings or baseball games, I sat at my desk, calculating exposure ratios. I earned my spot, but her deal made sure no one could erase me without consequences. Grant didn't know that. As he strutted through that first week, his ignorance filled the air like cheap cologne. He poked his head into budget calls, asked surface-level questions about innovation pipelines and leaner burn. He referred to me not by name, but as the finance veteran. And every time he said legacy, I felt the word aimed like a dart at my chest. By Friday, he was holding private lunches with the board, charming them with buzzwords and Instagram-ready charisma. I watched from my glass office, invisible yet present, while he spoke about cutting dead weight and ushering in a new era. Dead weight. That phrase stuck like rust in my throat. I wasn't angry yet. Not truly. I was patient. Because power doesn't scream. Power waits. Silent, calculating, compounding interest. Still, as I rode the train home that evening, staring at my reflection in the window, I knew the tide was shifting. The company I had sacrificed my weekends and my sanity for was about to be gutted by a man who thought finance was a vibe. He saw me as obsolete. He had no idea I was the clause. Grant wasted no time proving that charm wasn't decoration. It was weaponry. By his second week, he'd already scheduled one-on-ones with every VP except me. He floated through the halls like a campaign trail politician, dropping phrases like synergy dividends and operational recalibration. People nodded, smiled, even clapped, because that's what you do when the new king takes the throne. I noticed the pattern immediately. First, he cut off small expenses. The corporate card freezes, restricted travel approvals, no more vendor dinners. Then he shifted bigger pieces, merging 2 departments without consultation, slashing headcount by framing it as realignment. The man was building momentum, fast and loud, too fast for anyone to resist. I tried flagging it to the COO during a late-night call. "He's consolidating authority," I said. "Budgets are bottlenecking through his office. We're losing visibility on risk." The COO sighed. "The board likes his energy, Nat. They think he's decisive." Energy. That word again. As if charisma could balance a ledger. By the end of the month, Grant renamed our main financial projections folder from strategic models to vision forecasts, Lawson Edition. Cute, if you liked condescension. He restricted access too. Half my team couldn't even open the files they'd built themselves. When I raised it in Slack, his reply was a single thumbs-up emoji. The humiliation grew sharper each day. One morning, facilities rolled a dolly into my office with a passive-aggressive smile. "We've been told to swap your space with marketing." Marketing? They moved me from a corner office with windows to a cube outside the break room where the HVAC rattled and the motion lights shut off every 10 minutes. I kept waving my arms to stay visible, like a castaway signaling a rescue plane. My team avoided eye contact. Survival made them silent. Still, I kept working. Numbers don't lie, I told myself. If I made the data airtight, he couldn't spin it. That illusion shattered during the quarterly forecast meeting. Full department, all eyes on the projector. I presented a 5-year outlook. Conservative but steady, factoring in cost drag, inflation scenarios, geopolitical risk. Bulletproof. When I finished, Grant clapped once, just once, and smirked. "That was cute," he said. Laughter. From people I'd mentored, from analysts who once begged me to teach them pivot tables. Grant took the clicker and flashed his deck. Hockey stick charts, buzzwords like moonshot, and, God help us, a slide with Elon Musk's face pasted next to visionary growth. "This," he declared, "is what leadership looks like, not fear-based math." Then he turned to me, voice dripping with performance. "Natalie, it's time we stop letting caution paralyze ambition. Numbers are a story, not a prison." Something inside me burned. Not rage, not sadness, something colder, like metal left in snow. I packed up my notes, left the room, locked myself in a bathroom stall, and sat still. Not crying, not breathing, just waiting for the acid of humiliation to settle. I should have quit then. But quitting isn't in my DNA. My mother once told me, when someone starts cutting limbs, don't run. Wait until they cut the wrong one, then strike. So I returned to my cube, powered on my laptop, and kept working, kept documenting, kept remembering. 2 weeks later, The strike came. But not mine. His. He showed up at my desk on a Thursday, flanked by HR. No hello, no explanation. Just that grin, the kind a man practices in the mirror when he dreams of delivering lines.
We're making some leadership changes.
He said, syrupy smooth. New era, new energy. I didn't blink.
You're firing me.
He tilted his head like I was slow.
Let's not make this dramatic, Natalie. We're simply realigning the team.
Realigning me out of existence. HR handed me an envelope already signed. Severance, 2 months, no benefits extension, NDA clause stapled on top like duct tape over a bullet wound. My badge was deactivated before I finished reading page 1. Not a word from my team. Not the intern I trained. Not the manager who cried in my office 2 years ago. They stared at their screens while security escorted me out like a criminal. I boxed my life into a carton. 2 notepads, 1 stapler, a photo of my dog, and a flash drive labeled Historical Forecasts, pre-2020. They didn't even check it. Amateurs. I walked through the glass lobby slower than I ever had. Not with shame, with clarity. The early birds still typed at their desks upstairs, oblivious to the fact that the foundation had just been cracked. Out in the parking garage, I sat in my car and looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. No tears, no rage, just that cold burn again. I scrolled to one contact, pressed call. "Mom?" I said when she answered. "He made his move." Silence on the other end, then her voice, dry as ever. "Copy," Eleanor Walker said. "Now we begin." The night after my firing, I didn't pour wine, didn't collapse on the couch, didn't even scroll LinkedIn for sympathy posts. I drove straight to Westport, Connecticut, where my mother lived in what looked like a renovated barn, but functioned more like a war room. When I pulled into the gravel driveway, the lights were already on. Through the window, I could see her silhouette at the long oak table, surrounded by binders, yellow legal pads, and a laptop that looked like it belonged to the CIA. Eleanor Walker never waited. She didn't stand when I walked in, just pointed to the chair across from her and slid a glass of water my way. No hug, no, "Are you okay?" That wasn't her language. "Tell me everything," she said. I did, from the first carpet joke to the humiliating clap in the forecast meeting, down to the exact words. Numbers are just a story. She wrote nothing down. She didn't need to. When I finished, she opened a black binder so thick the spine had cracked years ago. Inside were neatly tabbed sections labeled with dates stretching back 2 decades. She flipped to one marked 1998, Rescue Agreement. "This," she said, tapping a page with a manicured finger, "is why he just signed his own termination letter." I leaned closer. It was the contract, the deal she had inked with the company all those years ago when bankruptcy hovered like a storm. $58 million, structured not as equity, but as a hybrid debt instrument with hidden clauses so tangled most lawyers would have given up after page 3. Clause 14B was highlighted. In the event that Eleanor Walker's direct descendant employed in a managerial finance role is terminated without board vote, the outstanding capital becomes immediately callable with compounded interest. I exhaled, slow. So if they fire me without the board's approval, they owe me everything, she finished. How much? She pulled out a calculator, typed a few numbers, and turned it around. $94,000 to $300,000. I swallowed. That's more than their liquidity cushion. It's more than their entire short-term assets, she corrected. If we call this in, the banks freeze them, credit rating collapses, and every pending acquisition dies overnight. Victor Hale, her longtime legal partner, walked in then, carrying 2 lattes and a stack of file folders. Tall, silver-haired, with the kind of courtroom voice that made judges sit straighter. He set the folders down and looked at me.
Welcome to the other side, Natalie, he said. You're not an ex-employee anymore. You're co-counsel in a very old chess match. My stomach twisted. For 15 years, I'd been fighting fires inside the company. Now I was standing outside, holding a can of gasoline. What's the plan? I asked. Victor opened one folder, revealing notarized copies of board minutes, capital stack diagrams, and audit trails so detailed they looked like archaeological maps. First, we verify every trigger condition. Grant's arrogance works in our favor. He's already made changes that qualify as covenant breaches, accelerated restructuring, offshore entity filings, even renaming forecast files without board ratification. We stack the violations. Then we activate? I interrupted. Eleanor shook her head. Patience. You don't pull the pin until the room is crowded. For 3 days, I commuted from my apartment to the barn, working silently across from them. My laptop hummed as I dug through archived financials, cross-referencing decisions Grant had signed with terms in the old agreement. Every time I found a match, Victor nodded like a chess player moving a piece closer to checkmate. The evidence piled up fast. One invoice retroactively signed, one vendor affiliated with a restricted entity, one debt reclassification that tipped a ratio just enough to trip a dormant clause. Each violation was a brick in the wall closing around Grant Lawson. Meanwhile, whispers began leaking from the inside. An analyst I once mentored sent me a Proton mail note. He's moving fast, but not smart. Everyone's nervous. A controller texted me late at night. Rumor is, he doesn't even understand the old debt structure. They didn't dare send more. Fear made them quiet. But fear also left trails. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The message was clear. The cracks were forming. Eleanor, of course, never reacted visibly. Each morning she brewed black coffee, opened a binder, and started with the same line. Let's see how much rope he's giving us today. Victor would chuckle, adjust his glasses, and record everything in meticulous logs. By the end of that week, the barn looked less like a home and more like a command center. Boxes of old audit records stacked against the wall. A whiteboard covered in timelines. At the center of it all, Clause 14B circled in red. That night, as we closed the binders, Eleanor finally looked at me. Not as a daughter, but as a soldier. Grant thinks he erased you, she said. What he doesn't know is that you're still here, in ink and law. He fired a person. He woke a clause. I nodded, my voice steady. Then let's make him read it. Grant strutted through the company like a man auditioning for his own biopic. Every town hall was a stage, every hallway his runway. He loved talking about momentum, about bold risk. But in finance, momentum without foundation isn't speed. It's a landslide. And he was too busy smiling for applause to notice the ground giving way. By his second month, he announced a capital optimization plan. It sounded impressive, but boiled down to juggling debts like circus knives. He reclassified revolving credit into long-term notes without board sign-off. He pushed vendor payments out past 90 days, calling it strategic liquidity. He even registered a Delaware subsidiary with the absurd name Lawson Global Holdings, complete with an umlaut over the O, a startup gimmick in a corporate graveyard. Each move might have seemed harmless to outsiders, but to us, sitting in Eleanor's barn surrounded by binders and legal pads, it was Christmas morning. Every one of his changes lit up our compliance board like a pinball machine. Debt ratio breach, Victor muttered one afternoon, circling a figure in red ink. That's one trigger. Vendor affiliate flagged under Schedule F, I added. That's two. Eleanor didn't smile. She just noted the date, poured herself more coffee, and said, He's tightening the noose himself. Meanwhile, inside the company, the fear was palpable.
An old colleague forwarded me a screenshot of a Slack message Grant had sent. Legacy is a myth. Efficiency is the future. The caption included a selfie of him high-fiving interns who barely knew how to read a balance sheet. Another message came from a procurement manager. He canceled our audit review cycle, said it was wasted motion. Wasted motion. Those were checks that had saved us from SEC penalties more than once. I stayed silent, letting the information accumulate. Fear makes people whisper. Panic makes them leak. And Grant's arrogance was converting silence into both. The board noticed too, though they pretended not to. Directors who once returned his calls instantly now began rescheduling. The general counsel, a sharp woman named Margaret Doyle, suddenly developed family emergencies whenever Grant tried to loop her into restructuring calls. Eleanor had already sent her a carefully redacted summary of the original 1998 agreement. Not a threat, just a reminder. Grant, predictably, laughed it off. At one executive meeting, someone asked about rumors of old capital covenants. He waved his protein shake in the air and said, "What's next? Ghost clauses haunting the balance sheet? Please. Numbers are mine to rewrite." That line made it back to us within an hour. Eleanor underlined it on a notepad and said, "Perfect. Arrogance documented." But even he wasn't completely blind. His smiles grew thinner. He started locking his office door. He demanded printed reports instead of digital files, paranoid someone was planting data. He even instructed his assistant to screen calls for suspicious accents. Victor's Connecticut drawl apparently made him nervous. By April, he called what he termed a situation room. He gathered the CEO, HR head, and an outside advisory firm that was really a PR shield. The agenda: mitigating legacy investment risks. The board wasn't fooled. They could smell liability, and liability makes directors scatter like pigeons in traffic. One quietly reached out to Eleanor's lawyer. Another dug up her old compliance memo. The whispers in the elevator weren't about Grant's vision anymore. They were about his countdown clock. Inside the barn, we built timelines. Every debt shift, every vendor contract, every skipped review stacked into a tower of violations. At the top of the board, Clause 14B glowed like a beacon. Termination without board vote equals immediate callable capital. Victor leaned back one night after a 14-hour review session. "You realize what this means? He hasn't just put himself at risk. He's exposed the entire C-suite. Once we pull the pin, the blast radius takes out anyone near him." I thought of the colleagues who sat silent while HR walked me out, the analysts who laughed when he mocked my report, the VP who clapped at his cute comment. For a moment, bitterness flared. "Let them burn," I thought. But Eleanor caught my expression and shook her head. "We're not here for petty revenge, Natalie. We're here for precision. Grant is the infection. Everyone else is just fever." That was my mother. Cold, surgical, merciless, but never sloppy. The final crack came on a Wednesday morning. Lionel, a warehouse operations manager who'd known me since my intern days, sent a single-line email to my encrypted account. He just signed an invoice retroactive to last year. Want me to upload? I read it twice, then forwarded it to Victor. His reply came back in under 5 minutes. "That's violation number 3. Triple trigger. It's time." Eleanor closed her binder with a sound like a gavel. "Enough rope. Tomorrow, we tighten." For the first time since my firing, I let myself smile. Small, sharp, and cold. Grant thought he'd erased me from the story. What he didn't know was that the real story hadn't even started. Grant arrived at the office Thursday morning the same way he always did. Starbucks cup in one hand, iPad tucked under his arm like a surfboard, grin polished to Instagram perfection. But when he reached for his office door, his hand froze. The lights were already on. Someone was sitting in his chair. Eleanor Walker never needed an introduction. White hair combed immaculately,
gray flannel suit tailored sharp, and a cane leaning casually against the desk. She didn't stand, didn't smile. She simply slid a thick black binder across the desk. It landed with a sound that cut through carpet and ego alike. On the cover, embossed in gold, Capital Agreement, executed June 17th, 1998. Grant blinked, tried to laugh. Can I help you? Eleanor leaned forward, palms flat on the desk. Her voice was calm, unblinking. I believe you've already tried. Now it's my turn. He glanced at the binder, then back at her. What is this? My money, she replied. Still in your company. $58 million, plus 25 years of accrued rights. She tapped the clause highlighted in yellow. And you removed my daughter without board approval. That means callable capital. Immediately. Grant's smirk twitched. HR handled that. Legal cleared it. This isn't how things work. On the contrary, Eleanor said softly. This is exactly how they work. You just never read the fine print. The door opened. 2 board members entered without knocking, followed by Margaret Doyle, the general counsel. Each carried copies of the same binder. Eleanor's lawyer, Victor, slipped in last, calm as a surgeon, setting a second envelope on the desk sealed in crimson wax. This story has 3 endings, Eleanor said, her gaze locked on Grant. 1. I call the board and demand a vote. They panic, they fold, you're erased. 2. I exercise the clause, force restructuring, tank liquidity, and let the market tear you apart. Or 3. Grant leaned forward, desperate. 3. You resign. Quietly. Waive your severance, forfeit your options, and leave without taking so much as a branded pin. Silence stretched. Somewhere down the hall, an intern laughed at something trivial. Phones rang. Life went on. But inside that office, time froze. Grant tried one last gasp of bravado. You can't just... Eleanor raised her hand. The crimson envelope slid across the desk. Margaret opened it, revealing her own signature already on the first page. The board had been briefed. The vote was unnecessary. The decision was final. You didn't know, Eleanor said, standing. That was your job. Grant sank into his chair, eyes darting between signatures that sealed his fate. His Starbucks cup trembled in his hand, leaving a dark stain across the contract. By noon, panic had spread through the upper floors like smoke through vents. Directors barked into phones, lawyers huddled in conference rooms, HR whispered about emergency protocols. Grant's laptop was deactivated before he even left the building. No press release, no farewell cake, just a short email. Your employment has been terminated. Please vacate immediately. Rumor had it he sat in the parking garage for nearly an hour, staring at the steering wheel, trying to figure out which part of the story he had missed. All of it, Grant. All of it. The board convened behind closed doors that afternoon. Eleanor laid the binder on the table like a loaded gun. Section 14B was read aloud, slow and deliberate, each word a nail in Grant's coffin. The total callable amount, principal plus compounded penalties, topped $94 million. If we don't comply? One director asked, voice cracking. Then I dissolve protections and make the filing public, Eleanor replied. Let Wall Street ask the questions you've been avoiding. That was enough. Phones flew out. Hands shook. No one even tried to defend Grant. By the end of the meeting, he was a ghost. Victor spent the next hours finalizing amendments. My severance was rewritten. Full pension, extended health benefits, and a payout large enough to buy a cabin in Colorado and a yacht to reach it. They didn't bother negotiating. Compliance signed, council approved, the board nodded through.
Anything to make the claws disappear again. The CEO called me personally that evening. His voicemail began with, "There's been a terrible misunderstanding," and ended with, "We'd love to make this right." I didn't return the call. Victor did. His email contained 4 words: compensation accepted, matter closed. The next morning, I walked back into headquarters not as an employee, but as the quiet storm that had passed through. The building smelled scrubbed, like bleach and denial. Grant's neon "no risk, no reward" sign was gone. His framed motivational quotes had vanished. Even the beanbag chairs he ordered were replaced with beige ergonomic seats that screamed, "Please forget everything." My old office door was unlocked, untouched since I left. Inside, my backup drive still sat on the shelf. My favorite pen, the one no one dared borrow, was right where I left it. I didn't sit. I didn't need to. Instead, I opened my laptop one final time, typed out my resignation, plain and cold. Effective immediately, I stepped down from my role. I recommend Sarah Nguyen as Acting Director of Finance. She respects the numbers, understands risk, and unlike some, knows how to listen. Attached was a glowing reference letter already backed by Victor's legal note, ensuring HR couldn't bury it. I clicked send, slid my badge into an envelope, and wrote on the outside, "No need to escort me this time." As I walked out, voices carried from the boardroom. Grant's replacement was already being grilled about contingent liabilities. The word reckless hit the glass like a rock. I paused only a second, smiled a smile so small it barely existed, and kept walking. That evening, I returned to the barn. Eleanor poured 2 glasses of whiskey, slid one across the table. For the first time since this began, her expression softened. "That's the last time someone calls you obsolete," she said. I raised my glass. "Not even close." We clinked once, no flourish, just steel meeting steel. When I finally left, the night air was sharp and honest. I slid on my sunglasses, though the sun had already set, walked to my car, and whispered to myself, soft but final, "Numbers are just a story, but now it's mine."